Let's start with the least dangerous combination on this list and slowly work our way toward one that's currently forcing emergency rooms to rewrite their own rulebook. Number 5. Alcohol and benzodiazepines. Benzodiazepines are the pills behind names like Xanax, Valium, and Ativan. Doctors hand them out for anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia, millions of prescriptions every single year. Alcohol needs no introduction. It's in almost every home, every fridge, every party. Separately, both are common enough that nobody blinks twice. Together, they're one of the most frequent causes of accidental overdose death in the world. So how do two completely legal, everyday substances turn into something lethal the moment they meet? Here's what's actually happening inside your skull. Your brain runs on a chemical called GABA, and GABA's whole job is to act like a brake pedal, slowing down your thoughts, your heart rate, your breathing. Benzodiazepines press that brake. Alcohol presses the exact same brake, just from a different angle. One drink, mild pressure. One pill, mild pressure. Both together, and you're not slowing down anymore. You're stalling out completely. And this isn't some freak accident waiting to happen. Researchers tracking opioid-related deaths over nearly 2 decades found alcohol involved in close to 15% of them, a number that kept climbing year after year. The consequence is almost eerily quiet. Breathing slows, then slows further, then simply stops, usually while the person is asleep. No gasping, no struggle anyone would hear from the next room. That's number 5, and unfortunately, the next interaction doesn't slow the body down at all. It does the exact opposite, and it does something even stranger while it's at it. Number 4. Cocaine and alcohol. Cocaine is a stimulant. Alcohol is a depressant. On paper, they seem like opposites, which is exactly why so many people assume mixing them just cancels things out. This pairing has been part of party culture since at least the 1970s, and for a long time, doctors couldn't explain why it was so much deadlier than either drug alone. Here's the part that sounds almost like science fiction. Your body doesn't just process cocaine and alcohol as two separate guests. Your liver actually fuses them together into a brand new substance. One that doesn't exist anywhere in nature. One that only gets built inside a human body that happens to have both drugs on board at the same time. It's called cocaethylene, and your liver is the only place on Earth that manufactures it. Cocaethylene behaves a lot like cocaine, but it lingers in your system far longer, and it's noticeably rougher on your heart. Researchers have linked its presence to a risk of sudden death up to 25 times higher than cocaine by itself. You'd assume the heart takes the only hit here. It doesn't. Cocaethylene also accelerates liver damage well beyond what either drug causes on its own, all while making people feel less drunk than they actually are, which usually means they keep drinking. That's number 4, a compound your own body invents without asking permission. But the next one on this list wasn't caused by nightlife at all. It was caused by cheese, genuinely. Number 3, MAOIs and tyramine. MAOIs, short for monoamine oxidase inhibitors, were some of the very first antidepressants, dating back to the 1950s. They worked by blocking an enzyme tied to mood-regulating brain chemicals. For roughly a decade, nobody noticed anything unusual. Then, according to one of the earliest accounts, a British pharmacist noticed his wife kept getting severe headaches after meals with cheese while she happened to be taking one of these drugs. By 1963, a psychiatric resident in London had documented 12 patients suffering sudden, dangerous blood pressure spikes tied to the exact same trigger. Doctors ended up calling it the cheese reaction. So how exactly does a slice of cheddar become dangerous? That same enzyme MAOIs block also breaks down tyramine, a compound that naturally builds up in aged cheese, cured meats, and certain wines. Block the enzyme, and tyramine floods straight into the bloodstream instead of getting neutralized. That flood triggers a massive surge of stress hormones. Blood vessels clamp shut. Blood pressure can rocket upward within minutes. Case reports describe patients arriving in emergency rooms with blood pressure so extreme it triggered actual heart attacks, all set off by something as mundane as a cheese board at dinner. What makes this one so unsettling is how ordinary the trigger looks. Nobody expects the dangerous part of their evening to be the appetizer. That's number 3, proof that natural was never the same thing as safe. But the final 2 entries drag us straight into the middle of a crisis that's unfolding right now, not in a history book. Number 2. Opioids and benzodiazepines. We already covered how benzodiazepines and alcohol hit the same brake pedal in your brain. Opioids hit an entirely different brake pedal, through a completely separate set of receptors. But the end result is identical: slower, shallower breathing. Combine an opioid, like oxycodone or fentanyl, with a benzodiazepine, and you're not doubling one risk. You're stacking two unrelated shutdown systems on top of each other. This combination became so lethal that in 2016, the FDA did something it rarely does. It slapped its most serious possible warning, a black box warning, on both drug classes, specifically because of this pairing. Why would regulators single out one specific combination like that? Because researchers studying opioid overdose deaths found benzodiazepines involved in roughly 1 out of every 5, not 1 in 100. 1 in 5. Here's how it actually plays out. Opioids alone can already slow breathing to a dangerous crawl at high doses. Add a benzodiazepine, and that sedation compounds. Breathing becomes so shallow and infrequent that the brain starts running short on oxygen. And because both drugs are so deeply sedating, the person going through this usually isn't awake enough to notice, let alone call for help. You'd think a federal black box warning would have ended this pattern by now. It hasn't. It still shows up constantly in overdose data today. That's number 2, a combination dangerous enough to force government regulators to step in. But nothing comes close to what's happening at street level right now, in overdoses that standard treatment can no longer fully stop. Number 1. Fentanyl and xylazine. On the street, it's called tranq dope, and it might be the most disturbing entry on this entire list, not because of what it does to the heart, but because of what it does to the rescue. Xylazine isn't an opioid. It's a veterinary sedative, approved for tranquilizing horses and cattle, never approved for humans at all. Over the past several years, it has quietly worked its way into the illicit fentanyl supply across the country. The DEA has detected it mixed into fentanyl seized in 48 of the 50 states, and in 2022 alone, roughly a quarter of the fentanyl powder they tested came back positive for it. Why mix a horse tranquilizer into fentanyl? Because fentanyl's high burns out fast, and xylazine stretches it out longer. Here's where it turns genuinely frightening. When someone overdoses on an opioid, the standard emergency response is naloxone, a drug that can reverse an opioid overdose almost instantly and has saved a staggering number of lives. But xylazine isn't an opioid. Naloxone does nothing to it. So a first responder can administer naloxone, successfully reverse the fentanyl, and the person can remain unconscious and struggling to breathe anyway, because the xylazine is still sitting there, completely untouched. And the danger doesn't end with the overdose. Xylazine cuts off blood flow to the skin so severely that it causes wounds unlike almost anything else seen in emergency medicine. Deep, fast-spreading, and appearing in places that have nothing to do with where the drug was injected. In Philadelphia, one of the hardest-hit cities, xylazine turned up in nearly 4 out of every 10 unintentional overdose deaths in 2023, almost always sitting right alongside fentanyl. So picture the full combination: a sedative that intensifies an already lethal opioid, overdoses that the standard antidote can't fully reverse, and survivors left with wounds severe enough to require amputation. And that's exactly why it earns the top spot. Every other entry on this list still had one thing going for it: a clear path to reversing the damage if help arrived fast enough. This is the first one that removes that safety net entirely. 5 combinations, 1 repeating lesson. A drug that's safe on its own doesn't stay safe just because the second one is safe too. The real danger was never hiding inside either substance, it was hiding in the space between them.